I'm Claressa Monteiro. This is Lens on Singapore by the Business Times. Big tech companies are asking employees to return to the office full-time. Some have gone further, threatening that those who don't comply could be fired. This shift has sparked a debate. Are companies overcorrecting? Or is there a legitimate need to reinstate office culture? Singapore's new guidelines on flexible work arrangement requests took effect on December 1st. All employers in Singapore will now be required to establish a formal process for employees to request flexible work arrangements. What does this mean for the future of flexible work in Singapore? Are these guidelines just a pretty idea that employers will ignore, or a way forward for better work-life balance? I'm Claressa Monteiro. This is Lens on Singapore, a podcast from the Business Times. Joining me in the studio today are Yeo Wan Ling, NTUC Assistant Secretary General and NTUC Women and Family Director. She's also a Member of Parliament. You sound like you need flexible work arrangements. On my right, Maureen Wee, Head of Human Resources at SPH Media. And rounding off this roundtable, Ethan Ng, co-founder and CEO of NodeFlair. Welcome to this conversation. Now, before we dive into what I hope and I think will be a lively discussion and exchange of opinions, let's set the stage. Wan Ling, could you give us a quick overview of what these guidelines are?
Sure. We've been pushing for flexible work arrangements for the last 30 years.
Right.
And I think, COVID-19 was a lot of things, a lot of bad things, but it was a silver lining for flexible work arrangements. And I'm so happy that so many Singaporeans know about it and they're talking about this. So a lot of people think that flexible work arrangements is actually work from home, but it isn't. Flexible work arrangements is flexi-load, flexi-time, and flexi-place, or a combination of all three. So a lot of the younger people, it's true, they kind of want to look at flexible work arrangements that is location specific, particularly work from home. But a lot of caregivers around my age, 20-something, no lah, okay,
Right.
40, yeah, 40-something, when you have kids and you have seniors at home, actually their preferred mode is actually flexi-time because it allows them to wrap their caregiving responsibilities around their work. So it is different from different groups of people.
So you're saying it's not just about flexible work from home, work from office,
Yes.
but it's also, can I start work at 11 rather than 9?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
actually multifaceted. It's
Yes.
not just about
Yes, that's right.
working from home.
Yeah, and it can even be like about job sharing. So a job can be cut into 3 people or 2 people.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
see the thing with job sharing is a whole different conversation, but I don't want to share my salary.
And I know a lot of people are talking about, it's all about work from home. But do you remember circuit breaker? All the moms and dads who are crying foul, get me out of the home because I can't stand to be with my kids. Do you remember that?
I cannot relate. First of all, I really like my kids.
But your kids like
They,
you.
can my mom's boss please take her back to the office?
That's right. So, I think that's the magic of what flexible work arrangements request is all about.
You open the door for asking Maureen a specific question that applies to me. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I recently saw when I was on Sentosa a work from a bar on the beach where you can sign in to free Wi-Fi. You start at 9, you go until 6. They give you free flow tapas and drinks
And music.
and music.
Sun.
So if I wanted to work from a location like that, still can, right?
Yes. So hearing from Wan Ling,
Yes.
I'm very thrilled because it's totally in our policy. We have got flexi-load, flexi-time and flexi-place. So technically it's been in place for a while. But you're right, flexi-place has been most commonly spoken about since
Yes.
COVID.
Yeah.
So the reality of being flexible to work in Starbucks or, any of the coffee places or at home, on the playground, library, that's something that's possible. As long as it works, right? It's being able to see Claressa in the flesh, to interact with you beyond the screen.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't need necessarily to see each other every day, but the cohesion between different departments, different divisions really does make a difference.
Actually, I want to double down on what Maureen said, which is that actually a lot of companies, especially like Google, they design their whole workspace just to have, just spontaneous discussions.
Sure.
Right? And some of the best ideas, even Gmail, if I'm not mistaken, was just a random thing where
Water cooler.
water cooler kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? Which is just impossible if it's like pure remote. If you're just at home, it just won't happen, right? It's that spark, right?
But Ethan, you said something that for me personally, it struck a chord because I actually joined the NTUC during COVID, and I knew no one. It literally took me over a year to get trust built up, right, within the organization. And I think companies need to look at this if they want to introduce flexible work arrangements in a good way, in a proper way, in a sustainable way within the workplace.
Ethan, you represent a specific age group, the younger. Do you find that specific demographic, the younger, they are the ones who want to work from home or from Starbucks or from other locations? They are the ones most resistant to coming to the office.
I'm taking a deep breath first because I feel like I'm going to offend a lot of people around my age group, right? But I think it's a trend, right? And somehow, most of these fresh grads that graduated during the COVID era, they're so used to that, right? And that suddenly become like a new norm. Some of the folks that I interacted with, yes, I think they do really like that flexibility, right? But, be careful what you wish for, because I still remember there's a colleague of mine who joined us about a year ago. He was saying that his previous company was so strict. You have to come in at 8, leave by 6, kind of thing. And then when he joined us, we were at some point purely remote. And he was like, I miss you guys. Can we just meet up? Right?
Right, okay. Now let's go to some hard facts. There are arguments and there's data supporting remote working is more productive. And then there's also arguments that say no, in-office working is more productive. Can you give us some of what you've seen as you were working on this framework, as you were coming up for it for SPH?
Yeah. When we were talking about this, we realized over the last 2 years, it's been so organic, and partly because work arrangements, work requirements have shifted over time.
Yeah.
So actually over the last 2 years, nobody actually said, please come back every day.
I don't think the bosses want to come back every day.
Yeah, they don't.
True that.
Yeah.
Bosses are employees too.
Yeah, exactly. So the work arrangements basically just shifted, and people realized that, hey, I cannot do that photo shoot virtually anymore. I cannot have that conversation without being face to face. So it happened very organically, and we realized over time, when we really went down to say actually how many people are back, more than 60% of our organization was back at work almost every day.
Wan Ling, what about you? As you were working on it.
Right. We spoke with 40,000 workers, and there was something that was surprising, but not so surprising. Caregiving actually was top of mind
Sure.
for this 40,000 workers, and it's because really Singapore is aging. The interesting thing was we found out if you are a caregiver, flexible work arrangements is actually the number one consideration for you to stay in the workplace or to rejoin the workplace. 90% of caregivers said that. Senior workers, interestingly enough, 70% of them said that flexible work arrangements would also be the top consideration for them. And I do think that companies need to have that kind of policies if they are looking to retain or to attract talent.
I want to come back to the question I asked in the opening. This new framework makes it possible for employees to request flexi work, right? But employees are they in danger of being penalized if they request it? The potential promotion, does that get threatened if they want to be more flexible and work from home?
So I think that's the magic of putting it in as a policy. So the messaging is not just for employees, but supervisors to know that as well. And the reality of it is about deliverables. It's not how many hours you work. So your KPIs is really very much tied to what are the deliverables that we agree, and to ensure that it's done within that time. So whether it's flexi-work, flexi-load, flexi-time, it doesn't quite matter.
I guess Maureen have kind of made it very intentional, right? What are the deliverables and things like that. But there are a lot of SMEs, that's just not their priority, right? Having that kind of thoughtful thinking into what the deliverables are, and the same old addict, right? Which is like out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes it just gets to the manager, right? Sometimes it's just like, okay, I don't see you that often.
That means you're not working.
Yeah, but I need you for something, right? Let's say 2 identical workers on a particular job, right? But someone is in office. The information flow just gets to this person first, right?
Sure.
So it kind of made it this awkward
Unfair advantage.
Yeah, this unfair advantage. So it's hard to, kind of design this, right?
That person who wants to come into the office every day, is it more likely that person's going to end up getting a promotion and then I work from home more? I miss out because I don't have that face time with my bosses.
Right.
It's a worry we all have. So we want to come to work. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. But we actually do better and we're more productive on the beach.
The beach example gets to me.
Is that a real fear? Have you heard that?
I think it's a real fear, and I do think, right, that having outcomes-based appraisals are actually very, very important. So it's not about who, sees the boss more, and updates more, that kind of stuff. But it's at the end of it, what comes out, are your KPIs met and all that. And there's also another thing too. Trust, right, is actually a two-way thing. So it's not just the manager towards the person. I speak from a very personal point of view. I used to be based out of Singapore for 12 years of my career. And so my boss never saw my face.
And they didn't forget you, right?
You know why? As an employee, I made it a point to call in and check in with my boss all the time.
Yes.
So, in the new norm, there needs to be a both ways thing. The company can implement more frequent check-ins, but as an employee, you can do that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, you said something that's very interesting. You said it's a suggestion, a recommendation.
That's right.
It's basically not a law.
It's not legislation.
Right.
Claressa, I just want to clarify this.
Oh, okay.
What we have here is actually called a tripartite guideline.
Right.
And it's mandatory for all companies to follow this.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
It's
a
mandatory.
guideline, but it's mandatory.
That's
but it's
right.
not legislation.
It's not
Where's the
legislation.
fine line?
Okay, so Singapore works, right? We have a secret sauce, and it's called tripartite partnerships.
Right.
Okay, and within this itself, you have the government, you have the unions, the labor movement, and of course, right, we have employers. And so this set of guidelines came upon because three groups came together, to discuss what was best for Singapore. And so what happens, right, is that it is mandatory for all companies to follow this tripartite guidelines. And this guideline brings in a formalized process, but it doesn't mean, right, that all companies need to follow this formalized process. If, let's say, right, asking your boss via WhatsApp works for your organization, please carry on. Please go ahead. There's no need for you to institute that formalized process.
Right.
So if, let's say, a tauke or a CEO or a boss say that, it's my religion to not believe in flexible work arrangement and this, and I don't care. Even like if Auntie A, right, needs to go for kidney dialysis, right? Too bad. When this kind of things happens, Auntie A can bring this to TAFEP. They will educate and advise the company on what to do and what not to do, And you know what? I do believe that for such recalcitrant companies, at the end of it all, they will lose talent. And I think, right, that's actually the biggest hit.
I mean, famously, I think Amazon CEO, AWS CEO, he did mention like, we're coming back to office every day. If you don't like this, please quit. Right? So I think they're in this very secure stage where, if you want to leave. But this is the culture that we want to build, right? But yes, I think a lot of the youngsters put this as a requirement, right? Especially some of my clients, their office is in Changi and it's like a little bit far if I'm staying at the West, It's like, really? You want me to go to office 5 days a week? Really? So it is a requirement. A lot of people care about that. If not, they just look for another company.
Right. Okay. Now, here's my devil's advocate question. Do you think employees like myself take into consideration enough the difficulty employers themselves face? Because, companies need to make money,
Right.
or I would be out of a job.
Right.
And if you pull it back even further, Singapore needs to make money. Otherwise, as a country, we stop being so competitive.
Right.
Do you think that maybe as employees, we're not thinking big picture enough?
Well, I think employees, if you ask me, have honed or developed a sort of sensitivity to the whole situation. So I think instinctively you kind of like know if you've got the right team, people will be thinking for you as an organization as well, not just
Okay.
for themselves.
Yeah.
How about the younger demographic?
Recently, what we realized among some of the candidates that I talked to, I'm a headhunter, right? So I talked to many candidates. Very interestingly, because the economy is not doing super well in the past 1-2 years, right? Suddenly, back in 2021, everything was a boom, right? Everyone started requesting for all sorts of crazy things, right? Like, oh, is there like food catered in the office? Is there, flexible, whatever, right? And then now when they realize that, hey, like the job market is not too well, it's hard to actually get a job or even keep my job with all the layoffs happening. They started to
So
be like,
they're more realistic.
they're more realistic. They're like, you need me to be in office 5 days a week? Not ideal, but let's do it. I have to do it, So it's kind of like a little bit like a recorrection to some degree, right? Like to some people, they're just managing their expectations. They're more realistic right now.
Good.
So, yeah.
You're happy to hear that, right?
Very happy. But you know what? You're absolutely right. So I think, right, Singaporeans are very pragmatic, but also at the same time, I do hope that employers, tauges, can also exercise compassion and empathy, because I think that caregiving need is really, really real out there.
Before I let you go, one more question. Is this whole framework, flexi working, whether it's location or time or sharing, all
Yeah.
of those things,
Yeah.
is this temporary? Is this a stepping stone to suddenly having to be told, okay, actually we need you in the office every day from now on, and there's no flexibility. You need to be here at 8:30 until 6 p.m. and we go back to pre-COVID rigidity. What do you think?
For me, I think it's about balance, because the reality is, you're right. If we need to have a talent advantage to bring in the best talent that we need to look at individual preferences. But we also have to look at the work expectations. What is the work that needs to be done,
Yeah,
right?
right.
In order for this arrangement to be sustainable in the long term. So I would say how to strike the balance and how do we adjust as we go.
Well, Claressa, for me, right, I think that the train has left the station.
So we're not
Open.
going back.
I don't think
We're
we're
not
going
going
back.
back, eh?
But it is now there's a bit of dust that's settling, and once we come past this whole period of adjustment, I believe that Singapore will be a more enlightened economy, a more enlightened workplace. So, there are some places that we went to study when we were coming up with the framework. And one of the best learning points, right, that I found out, right, was that in the best organizations, in fact, it's not about, hey, boss, can I go for, flexible work? And, okay, let me think about this. Isn't like that, no. It's actually the culture shifted that, can I go for flexible work arrangement? Yes, of course. And let's try to make this work. So it is that kind of cultural change, and I think, right, it does the company well, it does the economy well. And I think it's something that, we just as a nation need to bring forth, communicate well, build the trust, and I think we'll be good.
That is a great place to leave it.
Yes.
For now. For now. We may need to have this conversation again in a year and see how it's going.
Okay.
But for now, Ethan, Wan Ling, Maureen, thank you so much.
No, thanks for having us, Claressa.
Yeah.
It was absolutely
It was so fun.
my
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah.
Now, years ago, I was my terminally ill mother's primary caregiver. At the time, my only option was to leave my job to be with her in those final months. So I am a very strong supporter of all types of flexible work. But I think it is a partnership between our employers and us, and that's what's going to make it work. And I do believe that if everyone on both sides of the equation do that, it's a win-win for everyone. I'm Claressa Monteiro. This has been Lens on Singapore. Thank you for listening.